She stood on that porch every evening for 3 years, watching the empty horizon for a man who swore he'd return. When Samuel Walker finally rode back into Dusty Creek, he found not his beloved's embrace, but her fresh grave beneath the old oak tree.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
She stood on that porch every evening for 3 years, watching the empty horizon for a man who swore he'd return. When Samuel Walker finally rode back into Dusty Creek, he found not his beloved's embrace, but her fresh grave beneath the old oak tree. The Texas sun painted the horizon in shades of amber and rose as Clara Bennett stood on the weathered porch of her family's farmhouse, her eyes fixed on the distant road that wound through the mesquite trees like a dusty ribbon. She had stood in this exact spot every evening for 3 years, watching, hoping, praying that today would be the day Samuel Walker would come riding home. Their love story had begun simply enough, as most true love stories do. Samuel had arrived in the small town of Dusty Creek looking for work, a tall, quiet man with eyes the color of storm clouds and hands that knew honest labor. Clara's father had hired him to help with the cattle, and from the moment their eyes met across the corral fence, something awakened in both their hearts. "Miss Bennett," he had said, tipping his hat, his voice low and gentle like distant thunder. "Mr. Walker," she had replied, feeling heat rise to her cheeks despite the cool autumn breeze. The courtship had been proper and slow, supervised by her watchful mother and protective father. Samuel would sit on the porch after supper, and Clara would bring him coffee, their fingers brushing as the cup passed between them. They spoke of dreams and fears, of the land and the sky, of everything and nothing at all. "I don't have much to offer you," Samuel had confessed one starlit evening, his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. "I'm just a wandering cowboy with nothing but my horse and my word." Clara had reached out and stilled his hands with her own. "Your word is worth more than all the gold in California, Samuel Walker, and your heart, if you're willing to give it, is the only treasure I'll ever need." He had kissed her then, soft and reverent, as if she were something precious and holy. When he asked for her hand, Clara's father had given his blessing, though with a condition. "Prove yourself, son. Work the northern ranch for a season. Save your wages, and return with enough to build my daughter a proper home. She deserves stability, not uncertainty." Samuel had agreed without hesitation. "I'll work twice as hard, sir. I'll return in 1 year with everything I need to give Clara the life she deserves." The morning he left remained etched in Clara's memory like words carved in stone. The air had been crisp with the promise of winter, and she had pressed a small locket into his calloused palm, a silver heart that had belonged to her grandmother. "Keep it close," she had whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "And come back to me. I swear it on my life," Samuel had vowed, pressing his lips to her forehead. "Wait for me, Clara. No matter what happens, wait for me. I'll wait forever if I must," she had promised. He had mounted his chestnut mare and ridden north without looking back, because they both knew if he turned around, he would never be able to leave. Clara had watched until he became a speck on the horizon, until even the dust from his horse's hooves had settled back to earth. The first year passed slowly, marked by letters that arrived sporadically with travelers passing through. Samuel wrote of the harsh conditions at the northern ranch, of brutal winters and demanding work, but also of his growing savings and his constant love. "My dearest Clara," one letter read, "the snow falls heavy here, but thoughts of your smile warm me better than any fire. I count the days until I can hold you again. Yours eternally, Samuel." Clara kept every letter in a wooden box beneath her bed, reading them by candlelight until the paper grew soft from handling. She wrote back faithfully, sending her words with every trader and traveler heading north. Then the letters stopped. Weeks turned to months, and the silence grew deafening. Clara made inquiries, sent messages, even begged her father to hire someone to search for information. The responses that trickled back were vague and contradictory. Some said the northern ranch had been hit by a terrible blizzard. Others spoke of a conflict with cattle thieves. A few suggested that Samuel had simply moved on, as drifting cowboys often did. Clara refused to believe the last explanation. She knew Samuel's heart as well as she knew her own. "Perhaps it's time to accept the truth," her mother said gently one evening, finding Clara once again at her post on the porch. "He may not be coming back, sweetheart." "He will," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "He gave me his word." A year and a half after Samuel's departure, a wealthy rancher named Theodore Carlson began calling on Clara. He was handsome in a polished way, with fine clothes and an easy smile, and he owned the largest spread in 3 counties. Her parents encouraged the match, worried about their daughter wasting her youth on a ghost. "Consider your future," her father urged. "Mr. Carlson can give you security, comfort, a life of ease. What can a missing cowboy offer?" "Love," Clara answered simply. "Samuel can offer love." She refused Theodore's proposals, first politely, then firmly, then with an edge of desperation that made the wealthy rancher's smile turn cold. "You're a fool, Clara Bennett," Theodore said after his 3rd rejection. "Waiting for a man who abandoned you." "He didn't abandon me. Something happened. I feel it in my soul." Theodore had laughed, a cruel sound. "Feel it all you want. Your cowboy is either buried in some unmarked grave or he's found a new woman to warm his bed. Either way, you're wasting your life." Despite the harsh words, Clara's faith remained unshaken, even as her health began to decline. The endless waiting, the sleepless nights, the constant worry had taken their toll. By the 3rd year, her once rosy cheeks had grown pale, and the spark in her blue eyes had dimmed to an ember. The doctor diagnosed her with a weakened heart, literally and metaphorically broken, he said with sadness. She needed rest, peace, freedom from worry. Instead, Clara continued her vigil, standing on the porch each evening until the stars emerged and her mother guided her inside. What Clara didn't know was that Samuel Walker had never forgotten his promise. He had been badly wounded during a confrontation with outlaws who had tried to steal the ranch's cattle. A bullet had lodged near his spine, and for months he had lain in a distant farmhouse, unable to move, unable to send word. The kind family who had found him had nursed him slowly back to health, but the recovery had been agonizing. Learning to walk again had taken nearly a year. Finding his way back to Texas had taken months more. Every step of the journey was marked by pain, but every step brought him closer to Clara. He had heard no news from Dusty Creek during his recovery. His letters had gone unanswered, lost perhaps in the vast wilderness between them. Some nights, doubt crept into his mind like a cold wind. Would she still be waiting? Would she have given up, moved on, married another? But then he would press his hand against the silver locket that still hung around his neck, feel the warmth of the metal against his skin, and his resolve would strengthen. Clara had promised. Clara loved him. Clara would wait. On a spring evening, exactly 3 years and 4 months after his departure, Samuel Walker finally crested the hill overlooking Dusty Creek. The setting sun cast golden light across the familiar landscape, and his heart swelled with emotion. Home. He was finally home. He urged his tired horse forward, his body aching from the journey but his spirit soaring. He imagined Clara's face when she saw him, the shock, the joy, the tears of happiness. He rehearsed the words he would say, the explanations he would offer, the future he would promise. As he approached the Bennett farmhouse, he noticed a crowd gathered in the yard. For a moment, hope flickered. Perhaps they had somehow learned of his return, prepared a celebration. But as he drew closer, the dark clothing of the assembled people told a different story. Samuel dismounted slowly, his legs nearly buckling beneath him. An older woman, Clara's mother he recognized, turned at the sound of his approach, her face aged by grief, registered confusion, then recognition, then a devastating sorrow. "Mr. Walker," she breathed, fresh tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Oh, Mr. Walker, you've come too late." The word struck him like a physical blow. "What do you mean? Where's Clara? Where is she?" Mrs. Bennett reached out and took his hand, leading him through the silent crowd to a fresh mound of earth beneath the old oak tree, the tree where he and Clara had shared their first kiss. "She never stopped waiting," Mrs. Bennett said, her voice breaking. "Every evening, every single evening, she stood on that porch looking for you. Even when she grew too weak to stand, she would sit in a chair by the window, watching the road." Samuel fell to his knees before the grave, a sound escaping his throat that was neither sob nor scream, but something raw, more primal. "Her last words were about you," Mrs. Bennett continued, kneeling beside him. "She said she knew you would come. She said she would wait for you even beyond the veil. She never doubted you, Samuel, not for one single moment." He pulled the silver locket from around his neck, the chain breaking easily after years of wear. With trembling hands, he placed it on the freshly turned earth. "I tried to come back," he whispered brokenly. "I was hurt, I couldn't." His voice failed him. "I know, son." Mrs. Bennett put her arm around his shaking shoulders. She knew too, somehow. She always said something must have happened, that you would never willingly stay away. Her faith in you never wavered. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving Samuel alone with his grief as the sun dipped below the horizon, the same horizon Clara had watched so faithfully for 3 long years. He stayed by her grave through the night, through the cold hours when the stars wheeled overhead, through the gray dawn that broke without her in the world. He told her everything about the attack, the injury, the endless months of recovery, the desperate journey home. He told her about the nights he had dreamed of her face, the days he had survived on nothing but the thought of returning to her arms. In the following weeks, Samuel built a small cabin near Clara's resting place. He tended her grave with devotion, planting wildflowers that bloomed in colors she had loved. He never married, never strayed far from the land that held her memory. The townspeople would sometimes see him in the evenings, standing on the small porch of his cabin, looking toward the horizon as if waiting for someone. When asked why he maintained this ritual, he would smile sadly and say, "She waited for me. The least I can do is wait or her." Years later, they would bury him beside her beneath the old oak tree. The headstones stood together, weathering the seasons, bearing witness to a love that had transcended time, distance, and even death itself. On quiet evenings, locals swore they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand across the hills, a cowboy and his beloved, finally reunited in the place where their story had begun, together at last in the forever that had been promised.